Okay, I think we can go ahead and get started. Not good morning. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Haley Hadavall, and I'm the Events and Programs Manager for the NTC. And I'd like to welcome you all to our Tech Coach. It's our last Tech Coach of the 2024-25 series. And today's conversation will be on the 6 types of working genius. And I am pleased to introduce our speaker. It's Bill Wright, who is the Senior Director of the Learning Center of Excellence at HCA Healthcare. And Bill, thank you so much for being here. And I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to you.
Great, Haley. Thank you so much. And thanks to all that attended. My condolences to you. I should have said congratulations, but condolences for having to suffer through this. But I actually think you're going to find this really interesting material. You know, I have an opportunity to teach many different classes, mostly to our divisional folks here at HCA. And I do a lot of the Lencioni material, 3 signs of a miserable job, 5 dysfunctions of a team, the advantage, just great material. And I like his material for a couple of reasons. First of all, it's extremely practical, and it's wrapped up in a fable. And I love fables. I love story. And so I'll start with story. We'll launch off of that, and I'll share a little bit of my story. I've been with HCA now for 20 years. I just celebrated my 20-year anniversary on April 15th. I cannot believe it's been that long. It's unbelievable. And then I spent almost 21 years with General Motors. So I've had a little bit of a split career. I was born and raised in Detroit, Michigan. When you're born and raised in Detroit, Michigan, you have 3 career choices, at least at the time I was growing up, and that is GM, Ford, or Chrysler. And I ended up with General Motors. It was a great career. I spent most of it in the IT vertical and learned a ton about the manufacturing processes, both discrete and repetitive, that go into producing automobiles. While that was exciting, I wanted something different in my life, and I wanted to really impact people more profoundly and directly. And healthcare looked like a great vertical to get involved with. I was able to take transferable skills in my IT skill set and move over to the healthcare side of the equation. And it's been a great, great journey. I've learned a lot through HCA. I've learned a lot just from an industry perspective. And so that's a little bit about my story. Lencioni uses story, and I'll refer to my story and more details of it as we go through this material, because I think it creates relevancy. And somebody once said that story for story's sake is simply story. However, story with context and providing that context, it creates relevance. So I'm a big fan of that, and I subscribe to that pretty heavily. You'll see that throughout the time that we're together. As I mentioned, I think this is his best material. I think it's his last. I get a chance to meet with Patrick once a year. Anybody that's certified as an instructor for the Table Group, which is his consulting firm, gets an opportunity to have a session with him once a year. There's several of us that are in there, but I get kind of get the feeling that this is probably his last piece of work. Now, I can't pre-announce that because he hasn't said it, but he kind of hints at it. And what I like about what he did with this one is he typically starts with business principles and wraps a fable around it. In this particular book, there is very little fable. It's a true story about his experience navigating through COVID, along with his consulting leadership team. And what he found in the height of the pandemic, during the height of the pandemic, is he was getting feedback that he had not received before, and feedback that was fairly universal. What I mean by that is it transcended just the workplace. It actually was feedback coming from his family and close associates or friends. And that feedback went something like this: you sure are short. You sure are grumpy. You don't seem like you're having fun like you usually do. Your energy has changed in terms of how it's being channeled. And he took note of that. Now, certainly the pandemic changed all of us in many different ways. And part of that was probably episodic. It had to do with the pandemic itself. But there was enough feedback on a consistent enough basis from enough people to merit his attention. And so he did pay attention to that. And so he went to the whiteboard with his leadership team. Obviously, no one was in the office. They only came together in a very secure way and a very safe way. But he went to the whiteboard, and he wanted to figure out what it was that was causing him to be so short, so grumpy, so dissatisfied, really. That was not like him at all. And he shares his experience. And this is where the 6 Types of Working Genius model was birthed from. It was that experience. And I'll share with you what they went through on that whiteboard together and what they came up with. Now, what I love about this model is many things, but I'll mention 2 of them in particular. I think we've got enough personality tests out there that I'm not interested in taking another one because I get more confused about myself every time, just to be honest. I know I'm a gold green, that's a high D, that's an ENTJ, although I was an INTJ, but now I'm an ENTJ, and I think I'm flipping back to an INTJ. I'm not sure who I am anymore, but I know my personality tests tell me many valuable things about myself, but I don't know what to do with that, except to understand it. And I think that in many regards, those personality tests, as useful as they are, and I'm not being negative at all, because I think they do have some value inherently. The problem is we start to use them and subscribe to them as labels. And I think labels are extremely dangerous. And so I'm not a big fan of, walking around saying, oh, you must be a blue orange because you do this. I think that limits our ability to think about people. I think it kind of confines our thinking about the value of who they are as an individual. And certainly it's helpful to know their personality or their style or even their persuasion, their posture. But I'm not a big fan of the personality test. This is a productivity model. And I put a lot of emphasis on that, as you can see, because it's so important that as you go through the next 40 minutes or so, 35 minutes or so of material, that you really think about it as being most valuable when it's used in the context. Remember context? In the context, I'm going to tell you the story. Remember context? We're going to create relevance by the way that it's used for teams to be productive, most productive after all. Okay? So with that, I'll go ahead and introduce this. So let me talk about the genesis of the model. Remember I said they got on this whiteboard and they started putting things together, and the place that they started was in their journey was we acknowledge that every work effort has 3 phases of work that go with them. And then when they're harmonized and you leverage the genius and competency of those involved, it produces incredible results. And the first one is ideation. And so as you can imagine, that's basically identifying a need and a way to meet it. A lot of people think ideation is, I think about things. Well, I've got lots of folks on my team, I don't know about you, that think about a lot of things. Remember that context I talked about? It is vitally important to understand this right at the beginning of this discussion. Ideation isn't just thinking of things, coming up with ideas and thoughts and creative ways of doing things. It centers and is only most useful when it centers on a need. Okay? So there's something out there, a problem you're trying to solve, or whatever the case may be, that we start thinking around. And these ideas kind of gravitate towards that need. And they're only as valuable as they address that need. Okay? So that's ideation. The next one that he came up was that they came up with as a team is there's activation. Okay? And this is where you assess the viability of the idea or ideas, and you typically determine or discern the validity, viability, and feasibility of that idea in your environment, because not all ideas work in all environments. And so it considers a much broader context to really vet out whether that idea is something that we can really get around and make happen. Okay? Assessing the viability. The last one is implementation. And that's all about not just getting it done, but equipping resources that are required so that it can get done. You see the difference, I think, there. And by the way, we're going to hold to the end for question and answer. So if you could just hold all of your questions to the end, some of them may get answered, but if they don't, that's fine. I'll give you plenty of time to ask those as well. So these 3 phases of work, it was important to acknowledge, and they did, that every work effort consists of these 3 phases of work. So that's their definition, that's their context they're operating in. You might be surprised, but the most often overlooked phase of work is activation. You know, we love people that are big picture thinkers, I think is what we call them, or visionaries or something. We've got all kinds of labels for these folks that can think about things. Okay, but the ones that we really want to focus on when it comes to utilizing their genius are those that can attach to a need, a want, a desire, and attach ideas that have validity around that want, that need, that desire. Okay. Uh, then we jump to implementation because we love people that get it done too. Organizations are notorious for overvaluing big picture thinkers and get her done folks. And they forget that there's a really important piece in the middle, and that is discerning whether this is a good idea or not. We've implemented a lot of really not so good ideas in an effort to go fast, speed to market, be agile, whatever you want to call it out there. We got all kinds of little labels. The point is, get it done, get it up and running, drive to value. But if you haven't really discerned the idea, you do stand the chance of implementing a less than ideal solution. And so what is genius? In the context of his book, this is what genius is. It's a natural gift. I think that's so important to pause there for a second. This is not something you teach, okay? You either have it or you don't. We all have our natural gifting, okay? If you remember back in the 2000 to 2005 time period, there was a very popular book, and then ultimately a model and a workbook that came out of that time period, which was called Strength Finders. It was developed by Gallup. And the idea was, and I love how we shifted our mentality, and this plays off of it, by the way. I love how we shifted our mentality to why are we spending an inordinate amount of time on people's, we used to call them weaknesses. I don't know if I can call it that anymore, but opportunities for improvement, challenges, areas of development. I think those are the new phrases. That's fine. Why focus there if they're not really good at doing that? Why don't we focus on leveraging what they're really good at doing? Because if they do that, that's going to give them tremendous energy and joy. And generally, they're going to be pretty good at doing it. You know, we all need to feel some sense of accomplishment in the things that we do. And when we play into our natural gifting, when our natural gifting is valued by the organization, and it is huge. Hey, trust me, I did this with my team of about 60, and it is unbelievable what has happened with this team. We've gone from employee engagement scores of 72 to 94 last time. That's pretty good. And part of it is just a recognition of the natural gifting of the individual, taking a deliberate pause to really understand what gives this person energy and joy, what are they good at doing, and how do we align work that looks like that they can work on. Now, you can't do it all the time. It's idyllic, it's foolish to think that we're always going to align you with work that you love to do and you're really good at. But for the most part, going through a thoughtful exercise, which Lencioni would said, of considering somebody's genius and making sure you match the work as much as you possibly can to that genius has a tremendous yield in terms of return on investment. So I love these two phrases. Mark Anthony said, if you do what you love, you'll never work a day in your life. When you tap into somebody's genius, they love doing it generally, and it doesn't feel like work at all. And that's what Richard Bach said. The more I want to get something done, the less I call it work. I'd love to take a poll and see if anybody knows who Richard Bach is. I really would. I've only had 2 people that know, and I've taught this class hundreds of times. So it's a far cry. So in the question and answer period, one question for you. I'll start the question and answer period. Hey, that's unfair. You can't do that. Sure, I can. There's no rules. Question number 1. Who is Richard Bach? We'll come back to that. Okay, so let me give you an overview. Everyone has natural talents. This is what they found out. So remember, 3 phases of work: ideation, activation, implementation. That's consistent. Any work effort has those. And then acknowledging that everyone has natural talents when it comes to that work manifests in the form of 6 different types of talents or geniuses. And each of them is required productivity model. They play on each other for accomplishing any kind of endeavor. Okay. Let's see if I can continue to go here. Here we go. So we all have 2 areas that are considered a true genius. I just described those. They give us energy and passion. We're really good at them. I just wish somebody would notice what they are for me. Well, I'm giving you at least the ability in the form of this model to be able to identify those. Then two of the six types are what we call frustrations. Now, this is the work that we're not very good at it at all. We don't have that inherent gifting, if you will, natural talent. And so it robs us of joy and energy when we have to do it. Okay. And then there's the final two, and they're super important. This is work that it doesn't really feed us or drain us, and we can kind of do it well, but not for a long time, okay? It just doesn't work for a long time. And I think we have to be really careful about that because many times I know I have misinterpreted my team members' competencies and geniuses. And the problem is if you match work to somebody where they're working out of their competency for a long period of time, they will burn out. They will burn out. And I do think that's the new definition of burnout from this book that I got. Okay. And that is, it's not the volume of work that somebody does, it's the type and volume of work that somebody does. And if you have somebody working on either into their working frustration or their working competencies for a long period of time, that will be burnout regardless of the volume of work. So keep that in mind as well. Remember, the most important point of this whole model by far is this is an interdependent model. It's a productivity model. It's about finding people, the genius of your team, and putting it together in such a way that you can understand it, first of all, and then apply it to the work appropriately as it comes up. So if I get something where I have very little ability to ideate around it, it's kind of a corporate cram down. They gave it to me and I got to go get it done. Well, I can still be creative in terms of how I'm going to get it done. And I'll involve a couple of folks that have the genius of wonder, for example, that can ideate about ways to get that done most efficiently. So don't say, well, some work doesn't require it. All work has these genius opportunities to apply to it. And as we go through, hopefully you'll see that as well. Okay, so what are the six types? Well, there's the model. Here's what I love about the model. Number of things. I love that I think it's called a mnemonic. If it's not, humor me. Widget, really easy to remember. Widget, great way to remember the six types of working genius. I love the gears. Why? Because I came out of automotive for 20 years. Give me a break. Not really, although they are very familiar to me, but it kind of implies that the adjacent genius is driving the adjacent genius in the model, and they're all required. And that's the important part. There is no labeling here. There is no one that's more important in this. There's no more important genius than another, okay? They're all important because all work has those three phases, and these geniuses can be applied to that work very judiciously, very carefully, and very thoughtfully. Okay, so those are six types. And there they are: wonder, discernment, enablement, invention, galvanizing, tenacity. Let's talk about those. Wonder, natural gift. Remember I said of pondering the possibility of a greater potential and opportunity in a given situation. A want, a need, a desire. Remember, it's got to have a basis to think against. Invention is creating the original novel ideas and solutioning them. So it's basically taking what comes out of wonder, these ideas about that given need, and it basically says, I'm going to put some substance to it. I'm going to start solutioning it. I'm going to turn it into something more tangible than just an idea. Then discernment comes along. And those are the folks that have this natural gift of intuitively and instinctively, you've heard this before, this person just has a real gut feel for it. They really just have this great internal sense. You need those folks. This is the part that's most often overlooked. Remember that. They can just evaluate ideas and situations. They have this inherent gift to kind of go, I don't think that's going to work here. And there's a basis for it. It's not just pure gut feel, but it's a good gut to say, I'm not sure this is going to work. I'm not sure this is feasible. You name it. So these folks are super important, as are the galvanizers, because once you've discerned an idea and you've assessed it in a way that says, yeah, I think this is a go forward, you have to have people that understand all of the resources that need to come together, and rallying those resources, inspiring those resources, and organizing those resources to take action. And you can imagine at a company with 350,000 employees, that can be a challenge. So galvanizers are really good at going, hey, we need to talk to this group and this group and this group, and we need to pull them together. We got to have a PM and a BA, and you get the idea. They know how to do that. And then they get them fired up about what they're going to do. They get them on mission around this wonder, this invention, and this discerned solution that we're going to go after. Enablement is seen as kind of soft, honestly, and Lencioni puts a lot of emphasis on this in the book, but it's a big one. This is the natural gift of providing encouragement and assistance. This is not a cheerleader. Don't hear that. This isn't somebody that's artificially giving lip service to the team around how they got to go do a great job or the great job that they're doing. What they're doing is they're providing encouragement and assistance by clearing obstacles. Hear me clearly on this, clearing obstacles and providing passive least resistance for the team to be able to accomplish their mission. They're actively engaged. It's not just about, hey, you're doing a great job. I sent you recognition points. This is just fantastic. Okay, that's part of it, but that's kind of the manifestation of recognizing what the team needs at any given point in time and being able to help them clear those obstacles and be successful ultimately. Tenacity is pretty straightforward. It is truly getting it done. They just have the gift of being able to get it over the finish line. They can push projects or tasks to completion, and they're very results oriented. I think companies have overemphasized that. Not that it's not important. Please don't hear me say that, but we've overemphasized it. We got to have get it done type of folks. So this is a really important thing to do. When you're confirming somebody's genius, you have to think about whether it's a responsive genius or a disruptive genius. Remember, there's 6 types of working genius. You just witnessed what they were. And it's important for us to understand why people interact with their environment in a certain way so we can avoid judgment, okay? So responsive geniuses tend to respond to an external stimulus. Something has to happen for them to be put into motion, to be activated, for their genius to be activated, okay? Disruptive geniuses typically provoke or initiate change when they see a need for it, even if no one else does. They're kind of change agents. They're constantly challenging the norm. They're constantly kind of just playing devil's advocate, if you will. They're always trying to kind of make sure this is solid. This is a solid idea. This is going to work, right? We're going to be okay. We're moving along well, right? They're constantly at that. Those are disruptive genius. So the point on this one is you need a balance of both in the model, especially as you work across those 3 phases of work. Now, let me ask you, and you won't be able to answer right now, so typically I'd go through this, but we won't have enough time today. I'll give you the answer to this, but let me ask the question and then I'll answer it. I'm sorry to do that to you, but if you were to pick the responsive genius in this model versus the disruptive genius in this model, what would you see as responsive genius in the model? Well, this is something I love that Lencioni does as well. He arranges it very nicely for us. Those top 3 of the 6 types of working genius are considered responsive. Wonder is responding to a want, a need, a desire. Remember, discernment is responding to a solution and its viability out of the invention. And enablement is saying, how do I actively engage in the work effort that's been organized by the galvanizer to make sure it's successful? Okay. Disruptive genius, on the other hand, is invention, galvanizing, and tenacity, and they're constantly poking. You had this idea. Tell me more about it. Let me understand this. Galvanizing. What kind of resource are we going to need? Where are we going to need them for? Where's the funding coming from? Where you can imagine. Tenacity. How do I clear this obstacle so I can get over the finish line? They're constantly poking at the organization, the ecosystem that exists around them in an effort to get this done. Another question I might ask you on this slide, I would ask you on this slide is, which do you think is most commonly valued in companies? And I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt, disruptive genius. I used to laugh at General Motors a little bit when I was there, because what you could do there, and if you did it well, and I know people that made a living off of it, we had these suggestion boxes. Okay. And what would happen is if you made a suggestion and you implemented it, save the company money, you'd get a reward, and a monetary award, which was really great. The problem is most of the firefighters, if you will, the tenacious people that identified the problem in the first place, also were inventors. That was one of their strengths. So they would create problems only to solve those problems. It's kind of like paying coders to be able to develop a certain number of line items of code, okay? And get paid by the amount of code that they can generate. Well, if it's not good code, that doesn't make a lot of sense. But yet we really love tangible things. We really value those things. And I think that is a total error. We ignore the genius of wonder, discernment, and enablement far too often. Okay. And they need to alternate. It's not that they're inherently bad in and of their own. The fact that they don't have that check and balance is a problem in the productivity model. Okay. This is kind of cool. I thought this was a good way to show it. He uses it in the book. I think it's pretty good too. You know, the altitudes of genius, if you think about them, and I don't know how many of you know about flying. I don't know a ton of it. I do it. I've never flown a plane, but I've flown in many planes. But I think this is a good way to think about it. If you're thinking about those geniuses at 30,000 feet, you're really speaking about the genius of wonder. And that takes place at the highest elevation, kind of with our head in the like proverbial clouds. It's pondering, questioning, and speculating long before and high above the place and time where we're going to land this plane and get to our destination, which is the ultimate goal. This is cruising speed. This is cruising speed. Invention, on the other hand, gets a little lower. It's still quite high, 25,000 feet, still quite high. But once a question is posed or a need is uncovered, invention kicks in, but still well before and above implementation. This is kind of constant airspeed cruise and rate of descent. There's at least an acknowledgement that we need to descend. We're going to need to descend. We're starting that. We're at 25,000 feet. We're starting our descent. And we're starting to think about that ultimate goal, but we're not too deeply invested in it yet. I'm sorry, not yet. And then discernment is the next one. So at 20,000 feet, discernment takes the idea just a little bit lower, assessing the practicality and the usefulness of the idea or the proposal. Okay, we're getting closer to the ground. We're in round out, shift from the aiming point to the end of the runway. That's what we're starting to think about, how to navigate to that endpoint, that result that we're after, if you will. Galvanizing comes next, and that's getting all the human capital needed for buy-in and implementation. We're getting close to the ground now. We're at 15,000 feet, and we're in flare, managing the energy in the wings, preventing touchdown from happening too soon, okay? So we're getting pretty judicious and pretty intentional about what we're doing now because we're starting to get to that place. Enablement is where the implementation begins, with people pitching in and getting an initiative or endeavor rolling. That would be kind of the equivalent of, you know, you've got folks that come over and say, hey, buckle the seat belts, and you readying the passengers for the touchdown, readying the crew for the touchdown. You know, you're getting real serious about how to get this over and clearing any of those obstacles that might exist in the way. And then tenacity, keep doing that. Sorry, I keep hitting the wrong button. Tenacity is really touchdown. And that's getting it to the ground and the rollout and getting the passengers off the plane and on their way to their destination. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of a sense of how to think about this model in a fairly familiar way. I love this slide. It's the cheat sheet. And I'm happy to provide it, Haley, to whoever's on the call. If they'd like it, I'm happy to provide it. It's really good. But I'm going to encourage you, quite frankly, when we get done, to take this back to your workplace and encourage your leadership to do this as a team, because this is a really valuable exercise when you do it as a team. It's interesting to know about your own genius. You take an assessment. It takes about 7 minutes. It's a very interesting assessment. I will say that. The questions are weird. There's no other way to say them. They're just weird. But the algorithm behind it, having met with Patrick Lencioni a couple of times, he shared with us in the background how it calculates, how it kind of figures out what your genius is. And it's sound. I mean, it's really interesting how they take these seemingly very odd or weird questions and they're able to use that data in a pretty profound way to, you know, kind of empirically is what he would say, empirically be able to discern what somebody's genius is. So you're open to this. So just a review, and it's appropriate at this time. The stages of work, as you remember, that every work effort has 3 stages: ideation, activation, implementation. Those translate into where the genius is most often applied. The genius of wonder and invention applied to the ideation phase. The genius of discernment and galvanizing applied to the activation phase. And the genius of enabling or enablement and tenacity applied to the implementation phase. We also remember that there are responsive genius and disruptive genius. That's how people work. This person doesn't do anything. Well, maybe you're not giving them a stimulus and their genius is responsive. Give them something to respond to and you'll see them go. They'll love it. Okay. And why is that person so disruptive? Why are they asking so many questions? Well, they have one of the gifts or geniuses that are a disruptive genius that helps us to avoid judging people. We just understand how they work best and where their genius is. The 6 types with a very brief bulleted list of description so you can kind of remember what it is in relationship not only to the definition, but also to the diagram I just gave you. And then the elevation of work, and that's the diagram we just went through. So it's a really good overview. And again, I'm happy to provide that if it's helpful. So let's talk about this ideation, activation, and implementation. As I mentioned to you in the previous slide, ideation, that's where you apply the genius of wonder and invention. Activation, that's where you apply discernment and galvanizing. And implementation is where you apply enablement and tenacity. And what's the most often overlooked? Well, I'll get to that in just a second. First of all, this is an actionable model. Keep that in mind. It's a productivity model, not a personality test. Each one of the geniuses must be exercised for the next to be effective. So it's a balanced model. Now, to what level? I get that question a lot. Well, do you have to spend an inordinate amount? It's not about time. It's applying the appropriate level of genius to the work effort that you're applying it to. Some work efforts don't have a lot of wonder. It's pretty straightforward what you have to do, and there's a very limited amount of wonder to apply to it. Don't try to be balanced in that regard. Just make sure you don't ignore those geniuses and how they contribute to the overall success of that work effort. What's the most commonly missed piece of the puzzle? We know that. Activation. Wasn't that cool? That was worth the price of admission. How much did you pay to come to this? Probably nothing. So you can kind of make that assessment yourself. I thought the best way to show this to you is to kind of give you my team's working genius. So these are my direct reports, and I've kind of shaded their names out to protect the innocent, although Tom and others may be able to figure that out if they're here, so don't tell them. They already know they're genius, so it's okay. So we looked at this map, and I said it's most helpful when you have everyone take the assessment, so we looked at our leadership team first. And the first revelation we had about this, and usually I would interact with you, this is like a 2-hour course, 2.5-hour course. Usually I would interact with you and I'd ask you to kind of consult with me and tell me, what do you see? And you'd give me all kinds of things that you see and you'd be right spot on, I'm sure of it. But I'll just kind of fast forward through this. When I looked at my team leadership map, I noticed one thing. I noticed that we were delinquent in the area of wonder and invention. Remember those first two, ideation? We had very little wonder. We had one individual with wonder as a genius, and we had one individual with invention. So we did very little around being creative or thinking about solutions in creative ways and coming up with ideas. And we weren't even really applying it very well at all. Even more dangerous on the wonder side is we had a lot of folks that had that as a competency. Now, you remember what I said about those competencies. If somebody is leaned into too often for competency, it becomes problematic. They'll burn out because they don't really get fed or drained from it. They just kind of do it. And they can kind of do it, but they just want to do it for a limited time. There's the sustaining of that type of work just wears them out, completely wears them out. Okay. And most importantly, as you can imagine, is wonder and invention, and in particular, invention was a frustration for almost my whole team. That's not good because my team is responsible for saying, how do we take a given, we work on applications most of the time, productivity-based application, and create learning experience that help make our learners, our end users, use those solutions better, without disrupting their workflow in an untethered way, very personalized, very immersive, non-disruptive. Wow. That takes a lot of energy in terms of wondering and inventing. And if my leadership team couldn't do that, that's really interesting. Well, let's add on mine, and it gets worse. So I'm sure you're familiar with the terms positional authority and granted authority. Those come out of almost every leadership model out there. Positional authority is the influence you have as a leader in the organization based on the box you occupy and the number of lines that go with it. So it's basically very protocol-based, very bureaucratic, and it just exists because of the organizational construct. And your influence and your ability to influence the culture is highly dependent on where you sit in the organization and how many people report to you. That's positional authority. On the other hand, granted authority is where a leader has influence because those that are following that leader granted that authority to them. Ideally, you'd like both of those to come into some sort of equilibrium. That's a beautiful picture. It really does, but it's a beautiful picture. But they are two different kinds. In this particular model, I have positional authority. Okay, these are my direct reports. So when you introduce me into the equation, something really interesting happens. I also have TG. Well, that's interesting. I really think one of my leaders probably got most of my attention. And if I were to ask you right now, who would that be? I think you would pick it out very quickly. That would be, well, it says James. You probably figured that out. James. And when I shared this with my leaders, it was hilarious, to be honest. They're like, yeah, you think every idea he has is great. Well, of course I do, because he thinks just like me. And this is a leader's first kind of caution flag. Don't hire your own working genius. Don't overplay your own working genius. You're trying to create a team that complements your working genius, okay? There was another thing that happened. When the team recognized that I had wonder and invention as a competency, that was one thing, but let me tell you what was happening. Remember those low engagement scores that I told you about? Not only are the people in the organization more appreciative of the fact that we're being thoughtful about how to apply work to their genius, like really doing it. Like we post this everywhere. Everybody knows each other's genius. Everybody knows each other's competency. And actually, it's helped a lot to do some cross-team engagement that we weren't getting before, because some teams don't have it, so they go borrow it from another team. You don't have to know the craft, or you don't have to have the skill set. You just need somebody that has that natural gift of wonder, for example. Well, when you put my wonder and invention and you combine that with positional authority, the reason our scores were low, one of the reasons, there were several. One of the key reasons was the team had change fatigue. Okay. I think I understand why now. And this is where the model was super helpful for me and for my team, my leadership team. Remember, they're my direct reports. So anything I come up with, especially in that ideation phase, they feel is a direct charge to take to the organization. I'm also a progressive thinker. I think out loud. I just say it. I don't need you to do anything with it. I just need to say it. And then I keep saying it. And I'm not afraid to just keep talking through things. Well, that's dangerous. And it was really toxic to my team. Because what my team was hearing is all my gift of wonder. Remember, they didn't have it. So if they don't have it, I'll fill in the blanks because I have it. And when I do it, it's going to feel like a directive. And so what do they do with the directive? Go as fast as you can to get it to the staff so that we can get it done. And by the time they've done it, I've changed my mind because I'm wondering about it again. You see where I'm going. This is like a vicious cycle. I was wearing my team out. They had no idea how to interpret my genius of wonder and invention and using it. I was frustrated. So we always go home and tell our spouses, in particular, at least I do, and I've been with mine for 42 years, so she's heard it for my entire career. You know, we go home and they get the true story. In fact, they could probably do the performance review better than I could because I filter it when I get back. But it becomes pretty unfiltered when you do that, unless you're obviously married to somebody or with somebody that is in the same workplace. You're a little more cautious, maybe not, maybe worse. But anyways, I'd go home and I would say, these people can't think. Why do I have to think of all the good ideas? This is ridiculous. And why am I the only person that can think around here? I think I got the wrong team. Well, I did. I got that right. We had the wrong team. We didn't have a good mix. We have to do a lot of wonder and invention. By the way, only 3 of these are on the current leadership team. That's not a bad thing. They've all gone on to do something else. It's been better for them. I've talked to them about it. We've hired, by incorporating this model, we've hired wanderers and inventors. We need it more of that in the leadership team, and we need it more in the staff. And so every time we have an opening, we look at it through the lens of this working model. We're looking for more discerners, or we're looking for more people with tenacity. And we are very careful. We don't hire just for that, but we do incorporate this by virtue of the questions we ask and the scenarios that we go through in their interview to discover what their genius is, or at least their tendency towards genius is. And we hire for that. And so it's been extremely helpful for me as an individual. It's been extremely helpful for my leadership team and a reshaping of my leadership team, quite frankly. And it's been really, I think, beneficial for the team at large. They've received this well. They don't have that whiplash as much because I have good balance and I got people that can really think and really come up with good ideas. I feel relieved. Remember, competency isn't something I want to do on a sustained basis anyways, at all. And so I'm relieved to know that there are other folks that will wonder and invent with me and often acquiesce to that as well, which is great. Then they don't feel like it's a directive. All right, hopefully that helps to show you how this very seemingly academic model, productivity model, can really work in an organization. If I showed you my whole chart, we literally have a dashboard where we enter everyone's, and like I said, it's available to everybody. And based on work, believe me, they use it. They'll ask somebody with a particular genius to come over and help them with something. And it's been super helpful, even in terms of collaboration and breaking down some of those silos. Well, as I said before, I've become convinced after this book, burnout is not because of the amount of work you have to do. It's just you're not doing the right type of work. Your genius is not being applied appropriately. So when you go back to your workplace, I highly recommend you talk to your team. If you're a leader, think about taking this assessment. I can help you with where to go to do that. I think they're $20 a piece. They're not very expensive at all. But really go back and discover the genius of your team. Put together, find out if you've got a good productivity model, just needs to be repositioned, rebalanced, recalibrated to meet the work more intentionally, or you might be missing pieces of the model that are critical to getting things done. And it might inform you on future hires. It might inform you on, hey, if you got a lot of folks that are tenacious and you need very little tenacity, eventually they're going to get tired. So you're going to do them a favor by helping them understand that their genius is not going to be applied in your organization. Don't try to fool them into believing it can if it really can't. And that's helpful in that regard as well. All right, I think I've left 15 minutes, but I'm not sure. What time is it? How'd I do? Yep, I did okay. I'm exhausted, Haley. That's the fastest I've ever gone through that. But hey, hopefully it was okay.
Oh, that was awesome.
Yeah,
Yes.
let's do Q&A. That'll be great. Yep.
Yes. Yes. Does anyone have any questions? You can go ahead and drop them in the chat if you'd like, or the Q&A section.
My first question, so I get the first one, I think. Richard Bach. Who is Richard Bach? That's what I want to know. If somebody gets this, I will be amazed. Richard Bach. Nope, nobody. Okay, I'm going to tell you who Richard Bach is. Well, you get a couple of, let me get this sharing out. I don't know how to unshare. Isn't that terrible? How do I unshare? Am I unsharing right now? Am I good?
You are still sharing.
I
Yes.
am still sharing. Well, just keep looking at that guy. It'll remind you of what you don't want to do. You know, Richard Bach is a guy that wrote this book called Jonathan Livingston Seagull. It was back in like the 1960s. And, you know, who knows what was going on in the 1960s? I mean, I lived through them and it was a different period of time. And this book seems like it was under the influence of something, just to be honest. But anyways, moving on from that, really weird book, but it had a really cool lesson in it. There's a seagull that's with all of his seagull buddies every day. They're at the beach and they're enjoying their day at the beach. Every day they wake up and do the same thing. And at some point, this seagull kind of scratches his head and says, hey, you know, why do we only fly? We got these wings, but we only fly when we fear something or when we need to eat something. So basically food or fear, that's our motivation for flying. And we don't do it very far. I mean, we don't do it for miles. We do it for very short distances. We have these wings. We could do something with them. Obviously, he was a wanderer. He was probably not an inventor, but a wanderer. Hey, I have these wings. I see an opportunity. How can I apply that? Maybe even a galvanizer, who knows? But anyways, he eventually decides, I'm not waiting for these guys. Nobody wants to do anything. I'm going and taking flight. And he comes back and he reports, and the major part of the book is what the different perspective he gains when he's willing to go out and use something in a really interesting way. Now, he can't motivate any of them to do it, despite this really great picture of what the world perspective looks like for him after taking flight. And he continues to take flight every day, very intentionally for long periods of time. And I think that's a really interesting thing. You know, that wasn't work to him anymore. There was joy described in the beauty of what he was experiencing. I mean, there was energy that was gained to be able to take that next flight the next day. And so Richard Bach wrote this book called Jonathan Livingston Seagull. And if anybody's read it, you could do a better job of probably summarizing it than I could, but that's what I got out of it. And it was just a weird book, but a really interesting lesson. All right. I've given you enough time. If I don't get one question, this was a total failure. Total failure. Well, maybe a partial failure. Oh, come on. There's something in the chat. I see it. What does it say? Oh, no, that's you. Okay.
That was me. Sorry.
Are you having a good hair day? Yes, I am. The humidity is not as high as it usually is. So yes, it's a good hair day. Anything else? I love this book. It's just really good. I encourage you to at least read it, although it's not the best read. I actually think he has better reads, but the model is, it's phenomenal. And bring it back to your workplaces. Let them know about this. You know, let them think about it yourself. If you want to discover your own genius, I think that's good. Would prefer that you discovered it in the context of something larger, like your team, and be able to see, can I exercise my genius like I would like to? How do I exercise my genius? Even help inform your leadership about it. I think that would be good. Very worthwhile.
Bill, this is Tom.
Hey, Tom, thank you. You saved me.
If you were going to start a new product with a team of one being myself, would you assign tasks to people on a call this afternoon who will participate in building this data product by asking for feedback on what they think they are, or would you assess what you think they are? How would you get to, if I was going to build a perfect team in light of what we now know now after this introduction, how would you approach that? Let's say you would have 6 of us.
Yeah, Tom, I've got a set. In fact, I can go through it real quick since we got a few seconds. Is that okay to do? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, let me do that real quick. So what I give to leaders, oh gosh, I hid them. Can you believe it? Okay. I hid the slides. I did my job.
Figured out how to unshare, Bill.
Well, you know, here's the thing. It's real easy, Tom. The way we ask leadership question or genius questions in our interviewing, when we're trying to interview for the right team, to find the right team player, is we ask about scenarios. We never ask them what do they think they are, because what you think you are, we have many wanderers that are really wanderers. You know what I'm saying? Is that rude? Was I not supposed to say that out loud? Anyways, they think they're wanderers because they got these ideas and these thoughts, but they're wondering about nothing that's relevant. You know, we want wanderers that think about relevant things. Anyways, we love wanderers too. We just don't need them. In any event, so we ask very purposeful scenario-based questions in terms of how they would respond to different scenarios. And it gets real easy to figure out right away where their tendency is. And we're right most of the time. We don't get it all right, because if they join us, they do the assessment, and sometimes it comes out a little bit different, but not much, not materially, for sure.
Okay, so that on the website, I think there's something about a 10-minute test. Are you suggesting you could format that in a way that you would describe scenarios to get them to tell you in their response what they are?
Yeah, and I can save you some money. I'll send you the questions to ask if I can figure out how to unhide these slides. I'll do that after this. And Haley, I'm happy to provide this. If this is helpful for folks, I'll take out all the notes, and you're welcome to any of this, but take the test. The $20 is worth it. I think it's 20 or 25 bucks. It's worth it. It's from the table group. I'll also send Haley a link that she can include. Is that okay to do? Am I like doing something I shouldn't? Okay, good.
That's
Okay,
perfect.
so I'm going to do it. I'll send that to you. I'll send you the link, and folks can take it. And I think if you take it, you can really encourage others to kind of buy into this. I will tell you, at HCA, it's taken off. I've done 12 of our 14 divisions. So they're all buying in, and they're seeing some really great results. Mark Blaze, that's a good question. Mark Blaze, it's so good to see Mark Blaze's name up there. Hi, Mark. Golly, I love Mark Blaze. Huge fan.
Yes, he's great.
All right. How'd I do, Haley? And would you give me like a C?
Oh my gosh, I'd give you an A+.
Oh, I'll take it. I will take it. I will take it. That was awesome. Thanks, guys, for letting me share that with you. I'll get the materials and the link to Haley And then hopefully you'll find it useful. I would love to hear from you if you don't mind. I'd love to hear from you if you do it. It's really helpful for me to even reference outside of HCA. Like I taught this at Bridgestone. I've taught it at a small nonprofit here. Not small, but medium-sized nonprofit here. It went over very, very well. They gave me great feedback. And that way it gives a little more credibility to it as kind of a universal model, in addition to the HCA experiences I've had.
Awesome. All right, well, if we don't have any more questions, doesn't look like it. Thank you so much again, Bill, for speaking today. That was wonderful. I know that I'm planning to take this assessment, and I'm most likely going to take it back to my team as well, so we can all do it together. But for everyone here with us today, this tech coach has been recorded. So it will be uploaded to our YouTube channel later today. And then once I get all of those things from the resources from Bill, I'll send those out to everyone as well with the link to the recording. But please join us. This was our last one, like I said, for this academic year. But we will be kicking them off again in the fall. So I hope that you all join us then. Until then, thank you again, and I hope everyone has a great day.
Thank you, Haley.
Thank you.
Bye.